Hello Booktubians, I am Scribe, and today I'm going to be speaking about my top 5 Wheel of Time books. This will be in no particular order. This will be pretty much, if I had a gun in my head, what would be my top 5. They keep changing, so here we are. First up is going to be Great Hunt. Again, no particular order, I'm just going to be grabbing them chronologically. I might come to as a surprise, because Great Hunt usually isn't very often on people's top 5. It's sometimes pretty low on their lists, but it's also the first Wheel of Time book that truly got me hooked into the world. The first book, when I read it, Eye of the World, I was into it. I was into it as much as any fantasy book that I would have been into at the time, if that makes sense. Like, it was good. I just wasn't, like, enthralled by it, especially the ending. It threw me off. However, when I finished The Great Hunt, it's funny because the Discord channel, the server that I'm in with some of my friends, you can actually go back to May 2020 or so, when I'm listening to The Great Hunt, and as I'm listening to it, a scene happens in the climax, which I'm going to keep it vague to keep it relatively spoiler-free, for those of you that haven't read the series yet. I went, oh my god, and then I just, like, lost my mind in the chat as I was listening, and it was one of the best experiences that I've had in a climax for a book. It felt like a Sander Lanch before Sander Lanches existed. I was going to say before Sander existed, but... So, yeah, no, Great Hunt is awesome, and when someone asks me, like, yeah, but I mean, it's not that good. It's like, no, but it's The Great Hunt, and I personally love stories that are about a magical MacGuffin, but done well. A great example would be Silmarillion, or honestly, even Season 1 of One Piece. I don't know, I haven't seen the anime, but I just really like when they're hunting a specific artifact or something, and that's probably why I love Indiana Jones, but The Great Hunt. Next up, Shadow Rising. I've said this multiple times before in other videos. Shadow Rising is, I think, peak Wheel of Time. I think it does, proportionally, it does the most without having any of the build-up that the other books have that they rely on to be that good. Sometimes it's very hard when you're reading a series and you want to rate the earlier books very high, and you can't because the later books are better, but I think a lot of the times they're better because they got that good because they built off of these books. I think Shadow Rising, on its own, stands as a very, very well-written book. I would personally think well-paced. It subverts many of the tropes that the first 3 set up. They have all of the characters reach their sort of, not peak, because, you know, there's 10 more books after this one, but rather they reach their signature status, their signature look. So what you see on the covers, all the characters that haven't gotten those looks, they get them in this book. It also has some of the most intense and detailed world building that, if you're a world building fan and you like absorbing that information and you want to see what the author has in mind, it moves on from the derivative stuff that you might have thought, although I would argue that even some of the earlier books are not as derivative as some people might think. But if you still thought that these were derivative, this is where that is definitely taken and thrown out the window, because it is some of the best world building you'll see in fantasy. It is some of the best character arcs, some of the best action scenes even. Obviously there's way better action scenes later on, but rather that it does not ride on much of the merits of the previous book. Obviously it's the 4th book, so it does ride some, but I hope you understand when I say that it's not like your end game level event that has to ride on 10 years of movie making. It is just a good book. Not to say that the other ones aren't, because the next one on the list is... Where'd it go? Oh, we don't have the trade for this, but that's okay. We'll get it eventually. Lord of Chaos. This is book 6, and it is... I mean, I think these two, along with the last book of the series, are the longest in the series, and let me tell you, this book here is, if this subverts a lot of the expectations set up from the first 3, this one subverts it even further, and I would argue that there's an argument to be made, again, very vague spoilers, there's an argument to be made that the events in this book is a huge hit for the good guys, despite being a like traditional end. But it's not a traditional end because it's also a hit for the good guys. It's very nuanced, I think. I think this one adds nuance to the world building. This one adds nuance to the conflict, the plot, and the characters. It is a very Rand-heavy book. In fact, frankly speaking, these two are also Rand-heavy books. The fourth one really showcases the main character's intelligence, whereas the first three don't. This one showcases some of the deepest internal character struggles that you're going to be reading about for the rest of the series, and I think it really cements and solidifies and is almost heartbreaking in a way in this book. And the end is considered one of the most pivotal moments in the series and one of the most pivotal battles in the series. This is like your if you're like a Game of Thrones fan, for example, I'll say the show because technically what I'm about to reference is not in the book as far as I know, but the Battle of the Bastards. It's like your Battle of the Bastards. It's your, I wouldn't say Pelennor Fields because Pelennor Fields is a victory in Lord of the Rings. So yeah, next up on the list, I'm going to have to go with Knife of Dreams. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills. Knife of Dreams is Robert Jordan's last book before he unfortunately passed away. He ended off his life and his legacy with a banger, because for those of you that have read the series and know about a little bit of the background, Book 10 is considered his worst book, which unfortunately it's because it's sort of like a part 1 to this book. So, but boy were the fans treated well with this book, because this is all of the setup in Book 10 and even like the last few books before that, it gets paid off in this book. So if you're reading the series and you're struggling to get through those books, they call it the slog. There's always discourse on whether the slog exists or whatever. It doesn't matter. Point is, if you're struggling with the series and you're like at book 7 through 10-ish, which is where most people say they struggle, this book is worth it because it ends so many arcs, or well, I wouldn't say ends because obviously it's not the last book, but rather concludes many of the arcs that are long running. I think a lot of the characters that had a lull in the last few books, and those of you who have finished the series will know exactly who I'm talking about, I think they have a moment to shine again in this. And I think it's very reminiscent, in my mind, it's very reminiscent of 6 and 4, which I think are peak fantasy. This one returns to form as peak fantasy. And you also have the build-up of the last few books. So it really just, and then the ending of this book as well, much like the other ones, phenomenal. And especially if you're a lover of a specific character. So I don't want to put it's structurally sound. And finally, again, no particular order, but I would say Gathering Storm. The reason I put this above book 13, despite I would say that, so this is by Brandon Sanderson, because unfortunately he had passed away. Brandon Sanderson took on the monumental task of writing and finishing the books. This was supposed to be the final book, but he decided, and I think it was a wise decision, that there was way too much content packed to be only one book, so he split it into 12, 13, and 14. The reason I think 13 and 14 are better written, because I think he kind of gets into his, at least in my mind, he gets into his groove of things, but this one is above those two because of 2 to 3 very pivotal scenes. And again, if you've read the series, you'll know what I'm saying. And this is not a spoiler because out of context it means nothing to someone, but Veins of Gold, obviously. And also just the arc. This entire book feels like it has one of the best arcs. I think the other books, because of how Robert Jordan writes, and not saying, because a lot of what he wrote is in this book, of course, but I think it's a faster paced book because it is Brandon Sanderson writing it, and also it is, he has a faster pace in my mind in the way he writes anything, pretty much, but if there's an arc between 4 through 6 that is very well written, it is on that level of quality for the main character in Book 12, and it's all just in Book 12. And I think, again, much like like book 11, it rides off of the merits of book 11 and all the books before it, but that makes it really good. I don't want to make it seem like because I like book 4 that I don't like this. Like they're all great books. I just think the fact that this one can stand on its own as book 4 and not have to ride, it almost makes it better. And plus, I just like it more. But yeah, this is Sanderson's first entry into the Wheel of Time, trying to finish it, and I do think he does a phenomenal job. Frankly speaking, I don't know who could have done better. You can always speculate, but top 5 Wheel of Time books for their various reasons. And I could probably take any one of these books. I like to think that I could even take a single chapter from any one of these books and make an entire video on just that chapter alone. But unfortunately, time. So, Wheel of Time. Anyways, here's top 5. I hope you enjoyed this little ramble about my favorite Wheel of Time books. To let me know what you think and what your top 5 are, and tell me why I'm right.